information
Yeah, I mean,
for
that's just a concern.
getting on
I'm looking at.
buses, waiting for buses, and getting off the buses.
Big island there, Sean. I mean.
Yeah, but islands in the roadway,
The
Woody.
road goes right around, completely right around the exit, so, I mean, you know, I think you said it's 18 feet wide.
24.
I didn't write it down. 24? Oh, that's even better. So, I mean, school bus would have no problem going around. You know that better than I do.
Yeah, I know, but we're saying the school bus is going to come to the cul-de-sac. You're saying the school bus probably wouldn't go into the complex. I mean,
Again, that's been our experience, but I can't assure you that that's the only place the school bus is going to go. Like, as I said, we will be working with the school bus operator, the schools, to make sure that they have easy access and appropriate access for the kids, whatever limited number of kids there are that are, school-age kids that are living in the community.
I mean, is that something staff could look at with the bus company to see where on the plan that they would possibly go in? Because it is a safety concern in my eyes,
I mean, they do have the walkway, Sean.
Yeah, over near the clubhouse.
You can see they got the lines that, it's quite obvious, the walkway to the green. area.
To me, it's a lot of cars. It's like that's.
Understand. So it's something that maybe the applicant, we can reach out to Vinny over at BOE.
Yeah, Board of
And
Ed.
talk about that. Because obviously the school bus operator is not going to come into the private complex.
No.
But they could most likely will pick them up in the cul-de-sac on the public road. And then the other thing too is we're not talking about a lot of kids generated. from
No,
this-
but I'm
this
just
type
saying
of
is that,
development.
every kid matters, but
Understand.
it's a lot of traffic coming out because you have, at 7:00 in the morning, if you have a lot, I mean, I see this being a great thing, but you're still going to have traffic coming out and that's the issue to me. Where are they going to wait?
We value the safety of every
No,
every
and I'm
resident
not
that lives
saying
in the
you don't,
community.
and I'm
So
not
I'm
saying,
assuring you.
I'm just
They're
looking
gonna,
at the plan.
he's gonna reach out to Vinny. They're
Yeah,
gonna just discuss it.
I would
and
just
that'll be
feel
something we'll have for
comfortable
the
with
next
that.
meeting. We're not gonna close this public hearing
Okay.
tonight anyway, so.
So just along those lines, of when I look at the different maps, I think it would be a good idea to contact the school district. And again, like you said, they're probably not going to come in, but when I look at the layout of the sidewalks, it looks like the sidewalks go around each building. There are some crosswalks, but when you get to where the cul-de-sac is, it doesn't look like there's any sidewalks that lead directly to the cul-de-sac.
Exactly.
Or crosswalks that go over that way either. So I would expect that after we talk to Vinny or somebody at the school district, that maybe the plans will show, where those crosswalks or where the sidewalks would be extended for where the children would be picked up.
Duly noted.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Vazone, do you have more
Yes, we do.
for us?
Next on my agenda is Don Poland, who will give the impact report. Do you want to hold this? How do you want to do that?
Good evening, Chairman, members of the commission. For the record, my name is Donald Poland. I'm with the firm of Goman York Property Advisors, and we are based at 111 Founders Plaza, East Hartford, Connecticut. I'm here tonight on behalf of the applicant to present the municipal fiscal and economic impact report for this project. I issued you a lengthy report that I believe totals around 31 pages. I apologize in advance for kind of being so verbose, but the front end of the document that provides background information, specifically related to change in residential and retail landscape, and also the big picture kind of macro demographics, I think are critical to understanding the findings that come later in the report. So first and foremost, on the kind of change in landscape of retail and residential, the main point made there over that page and a half of narrative is at the end of the day, there's been a shift, one towards multifamily away from single family detached, and also a shift towards residential and commercial in proximate locations. Whether it be struggling regional malls trying to reposition themselves, adding multifamily residential to those sites, or the newer kind of mixed-use developments and lifestyle centers, we're seeing this combination of both. And there's a symbiotic relationship. The residential units will benefit from the amenities of the commercial spaces proximate to them, and vice versa. The commercial spaces ultimately benefit from having the residential units on site with a captive audience. From the demographic perspective, at the end of the day, when we talk about, especially in the context of fiscal impacts, when we're talking about school-aged children and enrollments and costs to schools, we have a tendency, as most of us in this room have some form of gray hair, to think back to kind of our childhood, our experience with schools and enrollments. And we remember a time when there was a lot of children, where all of our friends and people on our street, wasn't uncommon to have 3 and 4 children in a household. I lived around the corner from a small 11 house development that actually in 1978 generated 67 school-aged children. There were 2 houses with 8 kids, and those were 1,500 square foot splits. My point being is we don't have kids the way we used to. So that section on the demographics is really about a change in demographic structure of households, that our fertility rates and birth rates have been decreasing for decades. Back in 1960s America, the fertility rate was something like 3.6. Today, it's 1.52 in Connecticut. Tremendous decline in the number of children that we have. In the context of population and housing, and also ultimately school-aged children, then things like bigger economic factors such as jobs and population growth come into play. And as I laid out there, Connecticut's job growth has been stagnant for essentially 30 years, and population growth has been anemic. Connecticut over the past 10 years only grew by 1%. And the fact is Cheshire's total population declined by, I think, 2% from 2010 to 2020. You'll also notice that your adult population over the age of 18 increased by either 3 or 4%. And that says, A, your population's contracting, but your adult population's increasing, which says you're aging. And there's a table in there that shows, it's actually table 6 on page 10. It shows the median age of Cheshire is 46.2 compared to the state of 40.6 and the US of 38.3. And your median age has been increasing over time. So that past 10 years of census data confirms that. You're aging, you're gaining more old people. We're all getting older. As the community ages, it has less children. And then what the census showed between 2010 and 2020 is you lost 16% of your under 18 population, which actually relates pretty well to your school enrollments. So you lost about 1,100 in persons under the age of 18, and you lost 951 enrollments from your school district, which totaled even higher. I think it's close to 20% or so of your total district enrollments declined over that same 10-year period. So leading up until this point, your school enrollments have been in decline until actually the most recent year, where you had the first net positive growth in enrollments for the 2022 school year. My point being is those demographics, those big picture things are important. I also point out that over 80% of your households are owner occupied. Same with single family detached. And I think it's 74% of your housing units have 3 or more bedrooms. Your housing stock is built for families with children. Owner occupied, single family, detached, lots of bedrooms. That is the housing stock that ultimately generates the most school-aged children. And your current housing stock is generating about 0.4 enrollments per housing unit. So I want to dispel the myth of the past where we thought every house produced at least 1, 2, or 3 school-age children. Your existing housing stock's only about 0.4, less than half an enrollment per housing unit. The proposed development, the 300 multifamily units, as explained already by the prior presenters, 35% are one bedrooms and deficiencies, and then heavily weighted towards 2-bedroom units. And then there's, I believe, 10% of 3-bedroom units. The fact is, studios and 1-bedroom units generate only 0.04 students per unit. So 100 units would generate 4 school-age children. 2-bedroom units generate around 0.25 enrollments per unit. So 100 units would generate about 25 students, and 0.59 for the 3-bedroom units. So our total projection on enrollments comes to approximately, what was it? 69 total public school enrollments will likely be generated out of the 300 units. That's approximately 0.23 enrollments per unit, lower than your existing housing stock currently, and running a bit higher than what I typically find. I talked about other communities there. I talked about South Windsor in recent studies they've done, and I also talked about direct research I did in the town of Ellington. In those cases, we find typically multifamily generating around 0.16 enrollments per unit.
In
Yes.
Page 3 report, it says extender school enrollment is 35 allocated. So 35 kids or
I'll get to that.
okay.
It's a subset. I'll explain that.
New kids.
So typically we find around 0.16. You guys are running around 0.23. That primary difference there is usually we find today much of what's being built is about 50-50, 1 bedrooms and 2 bedrooms. So adding in a higher percentage of 2 bedrooms with a few 3 bedrooms kicks the multiplier or the generation rate a little bit higher, but well within the norms of what we find across multiple communities. So then we do a calculation. Well, on page 14, I want to point you to table number 9. I compare new housing permits since 2008 to 2022. 2022 is a partial year count. But since 2008, your net gain in housing units has been 356 housing units. During that same period of time, you lost 951 enrollments. So for every housing unit you added, you lost 0.267 enrollments. This is about demographics. When you also look at that chart, table 9, you'll see that your per pupil expenditures in 2008 were $11,000 per student, and they've increased to $18,700 in 2022. My point being is your education spending went up as your enrollments declined by nearly 1,000 students. Enrollments are not the primary driver of education costs, and it's something that we struggle to recognize. But the fact is, it's other things that drive the cost of education. $1.3 million in real estate taxes generated by the 300 units. We also account for motor vehicles that will be associated with those units. I use a factor that's lower than your required parking standard. 1 is to be conservative. 2 is based on experience of actual parking generation. So we assume 1.5 motor vehicles per unit. That's 450 motor vehicles. Using an average value that we've ascertained from multiple grand lists. Unfortunately, your documentation didn't call out the specific values on motor vehicles, but from my experience doing this work across the state, we set an appraised value of around 13,000, an assessed value around 9,000, and then apply the mill rate. And that comes up with about $476 per vehicle, or $142,000 in personal property taxes per year on top of the real property taxes. So the net total in revenue generation is approximately, I thought I had that number memorized. It's approximately 1.45 million dollars in revenues. We then do 4 calculations related to the school enrollments to better refine the actual costs of enrollments into the school district. The typical, calculation is take the total budget divided by total of enrollments and then say we pay $18,700 per year per pupil, and every new student's going to cost us $18,700. It's not really the case. You don't hire a new superintendent every single time you add a student. Your utility costs don't necessarily change every time you add a student, and even your teaching staff doesn't necessarily change every time you add a student. The fact is, the increases are not kind of one-to-one. So the first deduction we do, because we're talking about property tax burden, we're not talking about total budget burden, is we do a calculation for the local share of expenditures. I basically back out your intergovernmental funding into the town budget and education budget, the total intergovernmental funding, which reduces us from essentially $19,000 down to $15,500 in local tax expenditures on education. I then do what's called an allocated, and that is the accounting for those fixed costs that are not affected by change in enrollments. The district office, doesn't change in size based on enrollments, or it takes substantial changes in enrollments for that to occur. Your utility costs, your maintenance costs, all those things remain pretty much constant. So there's about 35% of your budget, your Board of Ed budget, that's not affected by increases in enrollment. And that brings us down to then about $10,000 in expenditures for a new enrollment into the school system, not the $18,700 or what it was. I then do one final calculation, and that is every student in this, every enrollment coming out of this apartment complex is not a new enrollment into your school district. You would be assuming that 100% of those occupiers came from outside of your town. Research into this shows kind of a fluctuation between 20 and 35% of enrollments out of new housing developments are new to the district. I estimate high. I go to 50%. 1, to be conservative. 2, to account for if, Jimmy moves out of unit B in this location and moves into this development, someone may move into Jimmy's unit and backfill it with a child. So we bring that number up a bit to 50%. So we estimate that 36%, that's a little bit higher than 50%, 36 enrollments, a little bit higher than 50%. 6%, 50% are going to be new to the district. So using the allocated per pupil spending with the new to the district spending, we estimate about $364,000 in educational costs from the development. Just so you know, sir, when you reference 35 enrollments on page 3, the 35 should have been a 36. My apologies on that. But that was the 36 new to the district students. So we have about 1.458 million in new tax revenue. We have about 364,000 in educational costs. And then I explain, we calculate the actual cost of general government services to residential units, and that comes in at another 329,000. So net expenditures or costs to the municipality are approximately 694,000. Revenues are 1.4 million. Net fiscal positive at the end of the day is $764,000. Now, if you want, you can apply my calculations to the full 69 students, not my new to District 36, and you still get a net positive development of a few $100,000. The fact is, the density of development, the value in multifamily housing, and the low number of school-age children generated ultimately result in developments that are 99% of the times fiscal positives to the municipalities, unlike single-family residential development. I then provided estimates based on various fee schedules from the town for one-time development fees. This will generate building and land use fees, permitting fees of approximately $468,000. And then we did a quick look at some economic impacts. Based on the construction costs, we come up with an estimated 87 full-time equivalent jobs created or maintained through the construction period. And then we estimate approximately, I believe it's $7 million in discretionary spending from the 300 households. At that, approximately 2.1 million will be spent local in the community. So at the end of the day, this development is a fiscal positive. It is an economic benefit. But I think most important at the end of the day, and we talked about this when I was before you previously on the master plan, that having the residential as part of the greater commercial development is absolutely needed. It makes it easier to occupy that commercial space when it's being built because of those captive households right on site. You're driving home from work in the evening, and one of those retail sites is, say, a Panera Bread, and chances are, if you're hungry and having dinner, that's the place you're going to stop compared to anywhere else. And that makes a really big difference on the commercial side. So that's the end of my presentation. And I'm available if you have any questions for me. Thank you.
Commission members, questions? No? Okay. Mr. Tedesco.
Very interesting, and you're an expert. I'm going to read your report carefully. These numbers about declining in population. I live on a small cul-de-sac, and let's say there's 6 houses on the cul-de-sac, including one that's not really on the cul-de-sac. 30 years ago, I was there almost 30 years ago, 28 years ago. Those 6 houses generated 15 kids, probably. Now those houses are occupied by 70-year-olds without kids, and there's no kids in the neighborhood anymore. And the thing is, none of us 70-year-olds are going to live forever, and pretty much we're going to be out of there, and there's going to be a bunch of 30-year-olds back in there with the 15 kids. So,
But see, that's the difference. You're right. You got there 99% of the way. Yes, you will die. Yes, 30-year-olds will move in behind you. That's all correct. The difference is those declining fertility rates, where we just saw in 2008, the fertility rate was like 1.86. Today, it's 1.52. In 1960, it was like 3.6. The fact is, when all those 30-year-olds show up and they all have children, there will be 6 kids generated from that development rather than the 15. That is the difference we are going through. We just don't have as many children. We marry less. When we do marry, we marry later. And when we have kids, we have fewer kids than we ever previously had. So, I grew up in the 70s in Wethersfield. And over the course of my 13 years in the public school system, I watched them close 4 elementary schools and a junior high. I think since then, the high school's gone through a renovation and an addition. But the fact is, there were a ton of students. That development around the corner from us with the 67 or 68 kids in 11 houses. Today, that development has a handful of kids at the bus stop now. So it's changed. We just don't have as many children as we used to.
well, I don't know. I won't be here in 30 years to know that, but we'll see. That's all.
Okay.
Any other commission? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Any more, Mr. Fasson?
This is somewhat related. Part of the, we have received wetlands approval, and the wetlands report has been filed. And the Wetlands Commission, we went into great lengths over the conservation areas and thought that this commission, even independently, would request looking into the natural diversity database. Matt Sanford is here from SLR. He did the presentation on turtles at the Wetlands Commission. And if the commission is interested in getting a brief overview of that and the extent to which the owners of the property and the applicants have gone to work with the DEP in protecting those the turtle areas and the turtles. If you'd like to hear something, Matt Sanford is here and he can do it fairly briefly.
You guys, what do you feel?
Sure, why not?
He's here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Down there.
Thank you, Anthony. For the record, it's Matthew Sanford. I'm a professional wetland scientist, registered soil scientist, ecologist with SLR. So we originally submitted a NDB request to the Connecticut DEP a little over a year ago. Obviously, we've been working on this project for a number of years, so we knew what the typical species were going to be for this particular site. Be that as it may, you still have to submit new inquiries every 2 years. So when the inquiry came back, we had 3 particular herpetological species, so reptiles or amphibians. 2 of them being turtle species, the eastern box turtle, which is an upland turtle, and the wood turtle, which is a semi-aquatic turtle. And lastly, we had eastern ribbon snake. So DEP had some concerns related to the 10 Mile River and projects that might develop in and around 10 Mile River. And so we met with DEP out on the site very early on to get their input as to what needed to be done. One of the things that was agreed to at our site walk was that we would retain a herpetologist to assist us in evaluating the herpetological species on the site, providing recommendations for protection of those species long-term. And so we retained one of the top 3 herpetologists in the state, Dennis Quinn, who lives right in Southington. And he has been on site for the past 4 or 5 months, actually studying the turtles. So what he's been doing is he's actually been, in May, he started putting radio telemetry transmitters on the turtle shells and actually tracking them throughout the site to figure out how many turtles are on the site and where they go on the site. So that's been ongoing for the past 5 months. We did find that there's a little over 20 eastern box turtles, which is, again, an upland turtle that uses the Lot 3 site as well as the other areas on this, the larger portion of the property. The wood turtle, which is a semi-aquatic turtle, like I said earlier, uses the 10 Mile River, lives in the river most of the time, but utilizes uplands for nesting. In May and June, we found, I think there was 15 wood turtles that were found on site as well. So he's been tracking them. One of the things that we've done to be proactive in terms of conservation, Darren talked about the conservation easement that was going to be placed on Lot 3. Again, that's something that DEP felt strongly and that needed to be completed on the site, was to have a conservation easement along the 10 Mile River for protection of that riparian zone that the turtles use. So that's been put in place. In addition to that, we've been following their best management practices in terms of guidelines, whether it was this particular lot, which is Lot 3, but the other lots that are already ongoing development. And in this particular lot, on Lot 3, we've actually already installed silt fence in anticipation that if this project does receive its necessary approvals over the course of the next few weeks and months, that if construction was to begin sometime in the winter, the turtles that would normally be in this location have actually been relocated outside the silt fence, so that this area has been fortified, so to speak, with silt fence around the construction zone. And Dennis Quinn, based on his radio telemetry and being able to track all these turtles where they are, and his students have actually gone out and relocated those turtles outside that silt fence zone so that they're protected for the winter and we're not in the actual construction zone, whether it comes this winter or even comes next spring. So that is what has been occurring on the site. We've taken, I think, what I would call a proactive approach at protecting those listed species. And that's where we are. And I'd be happy to answer any questions related to the turtles. Absolutely.
Basically, just out of curiosity, did any of them, like, I realize you're taking me, move them to a different location in that area, is that correct?
That's correct.
Do any of them ever find their way back?
Certainly.
Just in nature, whether it be Cheshire or another town?
Yeah, so what will happen now is that they've been relocated outside the silt fence limit. Once the construction occurs, everything is stabilized out there. The buildings are up and the grounds are all grounds are not lawn. Some of the turtles could venture their way into the development. That's not the preferred habitat. The preferred habitat's not parking lots, sidewalks, landscape beds and buildings. But they will migrate from one location to the other, looking for other habitats that have the preferred habitat, which might be scrub or upland forested areas. So there will be an occasional turtle that may enter the site. But mostly, with the preservation and the conservation of the natural forested zone, that is really going to be where their preference is to be, away from traffic, away from kids, away from pets, whatever it might be that could be in their way. So.
Yeah, thank you. It was just out of curiosity, like you say, you put a camera on them and all where they go and when, if they did come back.
Yeah, they will. They will definitely they'll disperse a little bit and also look for new opportunities, new places.
So you get your cameras back.
Yeah, well, no, it's a little transmitter. The transmitter lasts about 2 years. That falls off at some point. We don't get them back.
I got you. Yeah,
They
thank you
disappear.
very
Yeah,
much.
Thanks. Thank you.
Okay, any other commission members? Nope. Okay, Mr. Vazone.
Thanks. For the record, Anthony Fazzone again. One further point. The Property Owners Association has been formed. It's called the Stonebridge Conservancy Incorporated. It's formed and the declaration is being worked on, but lots 1 through 6 are required to be members of the association and to fulfill the requirements similar to the residential subdivisions that we have, where you have the detention basin basically that has to be maintained by that association. So the association's been formed. It complies with Article 9, which we changed recently, which allowed for there to be more than one association. Lot 7 on the other side of the river is its own association, and the 6 on the east side of the river will be required members of the association. That's all we have for this evening. Mr. Kurtz, you mentioned you're going to keep the.
Yeah, public, this is a lot of stuff we got tonight, and I'm not going to.
Yeah. Is there anyone in particular that you would like to make sure that we have come back to the next meeting?
I don't know. What do you guys feel? I mean, I just get nervous. I mean, if I close the public hearing, I can't ask you any more
Yeah,
questions,
that's
and
fine.
this is a lot of
No,
stuff that we
that's-
got.
I understand. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, we're going to that in a second.
We can go to that.
We could always talk to Mr. Glidden, if we have certain questions that come up, and then we could relay to you
Let
that, hey,
us
we
know.
want to see, is the traffic guy here or someone, architecture guy here, whoever.
Okay.
I guess we can work on that. Is that all right?
Yeah.
Mr. Natale has a question first.
2 quick questions. So if this were to be approved at the next meeting, what's the time frame to start building and for completion?
I know they want to start this winter, coming winter, and Mr. Finger probably has a better idea on completion.
Bill Finger, East Point. Assuming the project was approved in your November, I guess that's the next public hearing date, we would probably start sometime in the, I'll call it February or January of